The brain is a cathedral of lightning, a hidden cosmos where storms of electricity weave the fabric of who we are. Each thought is a flicker, each memory a constellation, each emotion a tide pulled by unseen currents. It is both map and mystery, the silent composer of every dream, fear, and fragile act of love. To gaze into its depths is witness the very blueprint of being human. Yet even as science advances, the brain refuses to give up all of its secrets, hiding its most profound truths in shadows. This is not just biology, it is the poetry of existence, encoded in sparks. If you find yourself drawn into this journey, into the mystery of thought, identity, and the storm of electricity inside us, stay with us. Like, share, and subscribe, so that more minds can wander with us into the hidden cathedral within. Beneath the silence of the skull lies a world of fire and current. Neurons spark like cities seen from the sky at night, billions of lights weaving highways of meaning. Here, the language of thought is not spoken, but transmitted as electricity, an endless storm that never rests. This chapter explores the fundamental architecture of the brain, the cells that generated symphony, and the rhythms that bind thought, motion, and memory into one electric dance. Memory is a cathedral built on shifting sands. Synapses strengthen, weaken, or fade, shaping the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Yet memories are not carved in stone. They're rewritten each time they are recalled, a ghostly performance that reshapes the past. This chapter unravels the fragile architecture of memory, how it defines identity, and the haunting truth that forgetting is as vital as remembering. Joy, grief, fear, and love, emotions are the colors that tint the grayscale of logic. The amygdala sparks fear, the hippocampus ties memory to feeling, and hormones flood the system like rivers of fire. This chapter follows the electrical and chemical storms that give rise to human emotion, tracing how the brain shapes not only what we feel, but how deeply we feel it. What is the I that speaks from within? Consciousness is the brain observing itself, a mirror, reflecting a mirror, infinity folded into thought. Scientists chase it, philosophers debate it, yet its essence remains elusive. This chapter explores the search for consciousness, the boundaries of awareness, and how the electrical symphony constructs the fragile illusion of a unified self. From artificial intelligence to brain-computer interfaces, humanity is learning not only to map the brain but to rewrite it. Yet each advancement raises questions of ethics, of identity, of what it means to remain human. This final chapter peers into the horizon of neuroscience, where the storm within may one day be shaped by human hands, and where the boundaries of mind and machine begin to blur. Beneath the quiet mask of the human face, beneath bone and flesh, and the stillness of breath, there exists a storm that never ceases. It is not seen, though it burns brighter than fire. It is not heard, though it orchestrates every word spoken, every heartbeat, every fleeting spark of thought. The brain's both sanctuary and battlefield, a realm of lightning where existence is continually composed in a language of electricity. Imagine a city seen from above at night, billions of points of light, glowing, fading, flickering into sudden brilliance. Roads glimmer like arteries, intersections spark with movement, and neighborhoods pulse with collective rhythm. This is what the brain resembles at its most elemental level. Yet, unlike a city built by human hands, this network does not rest. It does not sleep. Even in silence, even in dreams, it hums with quiet fire. At the heart of this storm are the neurons, the cells of thought. They are delicate filaments stretched across impossible distances, reaching out like the branches of ancient forests. Each neuron is a messenger, carrying signals across its slender body, whispering through tiny sparks. There are nearly 100 billion of them, more than the stars will see in the night sky. Each forms thousands of connections, weaving together an endless web where information flows in rivers of light. But the magic is not in the sheer number of neurons, it is in their conversation. They do not speak in words, but in impulses, sharp surges of electricity that leap across synapses, those fragile gaps between cells. These sparks, called action potentials, are the syllables of the brain's secret language. One neuron fires, and the next responds, a chain of lightning cascading through the dark. And from these chains come thoughts, decisions, emotions, and the fragile essence of being alive. It is a storm bound by rhythm. Like drummers in a vast orchestra, neurons fire not in chaos, but in synchrony. Waves of electrical activity ripple across regions of the brain, carving patterns into the silence. Some rhythms are fast, flashing like strobe lights, sharp bursts of thought and perception. Others move slowly, deep and resonant, guiding sleep, dreams, and states of rest. To watch these rhythms unfold is to see music made from electricity, a silent song that defines the difference between waking and dreaming, between remembering and forgetting, between life and its final stillness. The brain's architecture is more than a map of connections. It is alive with possibility. Neurons grow, reach, and change their bonds. Pathways strengthen when used, fade when forgotten. Like trails in a forest, each thought leaves its mark. Over time, the landscape of the brain is sculpted, not only by genetics, but by experience, by what we see, hear, love, fear, and lose. The storm within is not static. It evolves, rewriting itself day by day, moment by moment, like a manuscript, never finished. And yet, despite its beauty, the storm is fragile. A single imbalance, too much fire, too little rhythm, and the harmony shatters. In seizures, neurons erupt in uncontrolled floods of activity, a storm breaking its boundaries. In neurodegenerative diseases, pathways crumble and the lights dim, extinguishing memories once vibrant. These moments remind us of how delicate the symphony truly is, and how much of our humanity is bound to the balance of currents hidden behind bone and silence. Still, what astonishes most is not only that the brain sustains itself, but that it sustains identity. The storm is not mere survival, it is poetry. It composes art, recalls childhood laughter, trembles at love, recoils at grief. Electricity alone should not account for wonder, and yet it does. How is it that sparks, no different in their essence from the crackle of lightning in a sky, become the tenderness of a whispered memory or the terror of a nightmare? It is here, in this mystery, that the storm reveals its most profound truth. It is not just fire, it is meaning. The brain is both map and uncharted wilderness. Science can trace pathways, measure impulses, and record rhythms. Yet, even with the most advanced instruments, what we find is only a reflection, echoes of something deeper, something that feels less like machinery and more like soul. To peer into this storm is to confront the boundary between biology and identity, between matter and a mystery. And so beneath the silence of the skull, the storm continues, endless, tireless, radiant. It will never be fully seen, never be fully heard, yet it is there, in every heartbeat, every thought, every fleeting flicker of who we are. The storm within does not ignite at random. It follows pathways carved by evolution, sculpted over millions of years into regions of specialization. At the back of the brain, the occipital lobe catches light, turning the chaos of photons into vision, a silent painter rendering color, shape, and movement from raw signals. Along the sides, the temporal lobes unravel sound, pulling harmony and meaning from waves of air. The parietal lobe measures the world, orienting body to space, translating touch into awareness. At the front, the prefrontal cortex sits like a conductor, guiding thought, decision, and restraint, turning instinct into intention. Each region is a voice in the choir, and yet no voice sings alone. Fibers of white matter lace them together, billions of cables carrying messages at lightning speed. This network does not simply divide tasks. It fuses them, ensuring that vision shapes memory, that touch informs emotion, that sound intertwines with meaning. To imagine the brain as a machine with separate compartments is to miss its greatest truth. It is not fragments, but unity. It is an orchestra in which every instrument plays into the same storm. Even the simplest act, to reach out and grasp a glass of water, demands this unity. The eyes measure distance, the motor cortex commands muscles, the cerebellum refines movement with perfect timing. Behind it all, memory recalls the shape of the glass. Emotion anticipates the relief of quenching thirst. In the span of a heartbeat, millions of neurons fire in perfect coordination, transforming thought into motion, desire into action. Every gesture is a miracle of lightning, choreographed by a storm too complex for us to fully grasp. And yet, for all its grandeur, the storm remains invisible. It does not announce itself in flashes across the skull, but hums in silence. Only through the tools of science do we glimpse its patterns. Electroencephalography, or EEG, lays its fragile nets across the scalp, catching faint echoes of brainwaves. Functional MRI illuminates regions of fire, glowing red and gold as thought awakens them. Microelectrodes dive deeper, capturing the sparks of single neurons, recording the syllables of the brain's electric language. Each tool's like a candle in a cathedral, lighting fragments, leaving shadows untouched. Through these shadows, mysteries linger. Why does a certain pattern of firing become a memory of childhood? Why does another cascade summon the swell of grief or joy? We can map circuits, measure voltage, and predict signals, but the leap from electricity to experience remains elusive. The storm is measurable in data, yet its essence, the vividness of being, resists capture. To know the brain is to walk a line between the concrete and the ineffable, between science and wonder. The fragility of this balance becomes clearer when we consider how easily the storm can be altered. A single chemical, serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, can shift its rhythm, brightening mood, sharpening focus, or erasing clarity altogether. Drugs exploit this, bending perception into shapes both ecstatic and terrifying. Illnesses twist it too, depression dimming its fire, anxiety quickening its tempo, schizophrenia distorting its harmony into discordant noise. In every imbalance, the storm reminds us of how tightly bound identity is to biology. What feels eternal, the self, the soul, can shift with the delicate flow of chemicals and current. And yet, perhaps it is this fragility that makes the storm beautiful. Like a flame that flickers in wind, it persists, despite uncertainty, despite vulnerability. Neurons wear down, synapses falter, but the brain adapts. Plasticity, the ability to reshape pathways, to rewire circuits, ensures survival. A stroke may silence part of the orchestra, but new voices rise to fill the void. Childhood learning sculpts fresh trails. Adulthood experience reshapes them still. Even in age when the storm quiets, it does not vanish. It whispers, dimmer, but still alive, until the very last breath. To stand in awe of the storm within is to recognize both its power and its fragility. It is a paradox. Lightning bound by tissue, chaos woven into order, electricity transformed into poetry. It is as if the universe itself bent its laws to create not just stars, not just planets, but awareness, a way to look back upon itself and wonder. The storm is not merely survival. It is meaning bound to matter. It is identity bound to rhythm. And as long as it continues, we remain thinking, feeling, dreaming, alive. Memory is not carved in stone. It is written in sparks and silence, in connections that strengthen or dissolve with time. Within the storm of the brain, memory is the closest thing we have to permanence, yet it is built on fragile ground. Each recollection is a structure raised from shifting sands, rebuilt every time we call upon it, reshaped by the very act of remembering. Picture a library where the shelves rearrange themselves each night, where books rewrite passages as they are opened, where stories are never told in the same words twice. This is the nature of memory. It is not recording, not photograph. It is performance, alive with variation, vulnerable to distortion. And yet, despite its fragility, it defines who we are. From the moment of birth, memory begins its quiet construction. The hippocampus, nestled deep within the temporal lobes, acts as the architect, shaping raw experience into long-term recollection. It decides what fragments of the storm are worth preserving, binding them into networks that can endure. A child's first steps, the laughter of a parent, the warmth of sunlight on skin, all of these are etched into patterns of firing, stored in a language the conscious mind cannot fully translate. But memory is not a single structure. It is a constellation of types, each serving a different purpose. Some memories are explicit, glowing with detail, the taste of a favorite meal, the face of a friend. Others are implicit, hidden beneath awareness, guiding our actions without thought. When you tie your shoes or ride a bicycle, you are recalling not events, but skills etched into the circuitry of the motor cortex and cerebellum. These implicit memories are no less vital. They are the invisible scaffolding of everyday life. And then there are emotional memories, those that refuse to fade. The amygdala, seated like a sentinel near the hippocampus, binds feeling to recollection. Joy fuses to triumph, fear to trauma, grief to loss. These bonds are what makes some memories vivid, burning into consciousness with a permanence no effort of will can erase. A song may carry you back to childhood. A scent may conjure the presence of someone long gone. These are not coincidences. They are the fingerprints of emotion pressed deep into the architecture of memory. Yet memory is not flawless. In fact, its imperfections are what allow it to exist at all. Each time we recall, we reconstruct. Each time we reconstruct, you risk distortion. A story told often enough may blur, details shifting like shadows in changing light. In one moment, the dress was red. In another, it was blue. Eyewitnesses disagree not because they lie, but because the act of remembering reshapes the event itself. What remains is not the moment as it was, but the moment as the brain retells it, a ghost of truth dressed in imagination. Forgetting, too, is vital. Without it, life would be unlivable, a flood of memory drowning each present moment. The brain prunes connections, weakens synapses, allows certain recollections to fade. This is not failure. It is survival. To forget pain is to heal. To forget trivial detail is to clear space for meaning. Memory is not designed to preserve every spark, but to curate, to shape identity, not archive existence. And identity is where memory reveals its deepest power. We are the stories we remember. Without memory, the self unravels. Consider the tragedy of Alzheimer's disease, where plaques and tangles disrupt the architecture, where pathways dissolve into silence. In its wake, the person we knew seems to vanish, piece by piece, even as the body remains. What is lost is not only recollection, but identity itself, the continuity of being that ties yesterday to today. To watch memory fade is to watch the essence of self disintegrate. But memory is not only personal, it is collective. Families, communities, civilizations build shared memory through story, ritual, tradition. These are passed down, altered with each retelling, woven into cultures that endure long beyond individual lives. Just as neurons connect to form a mind, so too do human beings connect to form a history. Memory binds us not only to ourselves, but to one another, to the great unfolding of human experience. Still, memory is fragile. It flickers like a flame in wind, resilient yet vulnerable. It can be nourished by repetition, scarred by trauma, reshaped by suggestion. It is the most human of gifts, and the most easily altered. Within its fragility lies its paradox. It defines us, even as it deceives us. To remember is to live twice, once in the moment, and once in the echo. But each echo is imperfect, drifting farther from the source. The architecture of memory is not eternal, but it is enough to hold the shape of who we are, for as long as the storm within continues to burn. The architecture of memory is not simply built, it is sculpted by experience, shaped by the weight of time and the currents of emotion. Each moment we live leaves behind a trace, but not all traces are equal. Some fade almost instantly, slipping away before they can even settle. Others etch themselves so deeply into the circuitry that they remain for a lifetime. The brain decides, often without our awareness, which sparks to keep and which to let go. Consider the fleeting images of a passing day, the faces of strangers, the hum of conversations overheard, the shifting glow of traffic lights. These impressions dissolve as quickly as they arrive, absorbed into the background of existence. Yet a single moment, a kiss, a loss, a sudden burst of laughter can anchor itself within us, unshakable. What makes one memory endure while others vanish is not detail, but significance. The storm of the brain remembers not the ordinary, but the extraordinary. This selectivity is no accident. It is a survival mechanism, an inheritance from ancestors who needed to recall the rustle of a predator in tall grass, or the sweetness of fruit ripened in the wild. Memory evolves not to preserve everything, but to preserve what matters. It is a compass, pointing us towards safety, nourishment, love, and meaning. Yet in its bias toward the significant, it reveals its vulnerability to distortion. Fear, especially, burns deeply into memory, often exaggerating its power. A single moment of terror can outshine years of calm, shaping behavior long after danger has passed. The brain does not simply record, it edits. When we recall a memory, we pull it from its resting place, reconstruct it, and then return it altered. The hippocampus does not store experience like a sealed vault. It replays and rewrites, embedding new context, new meaning, new details. This is why two siblings can remember the same childhood event so differently, why nostalgia softens the edges of hardship, why trauma distorts until it overshadows all else. Memory is less an archive than a painting, layers upon layers of retouching, never complete. This fragility gives rise to one of memory's paradoxes. Its unreliability is what makes it powerful. If it were perfect, it would be static, but because it shifts, it adapts, it allows us to grow, to reframe our past, to see old wounds through new eyes. The memory of loss remains, but with time, it may transform, no longer a wound, but a lesson, no longer an ache, but a story of resilience. In its imperfection, memory makes healing possible. But not all memories bend so gently. Some return unbidden, sharp as broken glass. Trauma imprints itself with ferocity, the amygdala searing emotion into recollection so powerfully that it resists the softening touch of time. Flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, nightmares, these are echoes of the storm, replayed against our will. In such moments, memory ceases to be a guide and becomes a prison, trapping the mind in loops it cannot escape. The architecture, once fragile, becomes rigid, locked in patterns that hold suffering alive. Yet even here, hope remains. Neuroscience shows that memory can be reshaped, even traumatic memory. Through therapy, through new experience, through deliberate practice, the brain can rewrite pathways, soften echoes, and release what once seemed immovable. Plasticity, the brain's remarkable ability to rewire, offers not only survival, but renewal. It is proof that the fragile architecture is not weakness, but resilience disguised. What then does this mean for identity? If memory is fragile, shifting, and fallible, can the self it constructs be trusted? Perhaps the answer lies not in accuracy, but in coherence. We do not need memories to be perfect, feel whole. We need them to form a story, a narrative thread that binds childhood to adulthood, past to present, dream to reality. In this way, memory is less about truth and more about meaning. We are not the sum of exact details, but of the stories we tell ourselves about what we have lived. Still, there is a haunting thought. What happens when the architecture collapses? In dementia, when the hippocampus falters, when pathways dissolve, the story unravels. Names are forgotten, faces lose recognition, moments vanish into the void. The self dissolves like sand slipping through fingers. For those who remain watching, it is like witnessing a library burn one book at a time. And yet, even in this loss, small fragments endure: the warmth of touch, the comfort of music, the spark of laughter. Memory may falter, but the storm within finds way to hold on to pieces of light. The architecture of memory is a paradox, fragile yet resilient, fallible yet essential, ever-changing yet central to who we are. It is a mirror that does not reflect perfectly, but enough to let us recognize ourselves. Without it, we are adrift. With it, we carry not only the past, but the meaning of the past, and in that meaning we remain human. If memory is the architecture of identity, then emotion is the color that floods its walls. It is the force that gives texture to experience, turning a sequence of events into stories we feel rather than simply remember. Without emotion, memory is sterile. Without emotion, thought is directionless. The storm within the brain does not only think, it feels, and in that feeling, it shapes what it means to be alive. Emotions are not abstract. They are storms of their own, woven from sparks and chemicals, rhythms and pulses. At their heart lies the amygdala, an almond-shaped structure buried deep in the brain's temporal lobe. It is both sentinel and alarm, scanning the world for threats, igniting fear when danger draws near. The amygdala remembers what harmed us once and warns us never to forget. Its vigilance kept our ancestors alive, but in the modern world, it sometimes shouts too loudly, flooding the mind with fear long after danger has passed. Yet emotion is not confined to fear. The hippocampus binds memory to feeling, ensuring that joy lingers longer than detail, that grief outlasts the reasons for sorrow. The prefrontal cortex, perched at the front of the brain, tempers these raw forces, guiding them into balance, weighing reason against passion. In this fragile dialogue between deep instinct and conscious thought, the self emerges, but emotion is not the voice of a single structure, it is a chorus. Hormones surge like rivers through the bloodstream, carrying signals that alter the very rhythm of the brain. Dopamine sparks reward and anticipation, a flicker of fire that drives us toward desire. Serotonin steadies mood, casting shadows or light across the landscape of the mind. Oxytocin, released in moments of intimacy, binds us to others, a chemical thread weaving connection into biology. These are not metaphors, they are the literal foundations of love, trust, longing, and despair. To feel joy is to be caught in a cascade of chemistry. The brain lights up, dopamine flowing like sunlight through its circuits, amplifying sensation, making the ordinary extraordinary. To feel grief is to sink into silence, serotonin diminished, neural rhythms slowing to a dirge. To feel anger is to burn, adrenaline flooding the body, quickening the pulse, tightening the muscles for battle. These states are not illusions. They are the storm turned inward, shaping perception, dictating behavior, giving rise to the raw immediacy of human life. And yet, emotion is not only reaction, it is compass. It tells us where to go, what to avoid, what to cherish. A parent's love anchors the child's survival. Fear keeps us from fire, from cliffs, from dangers unseen. Joy pulls us toward community, laughter binding us together stronger than reason alone. Emotion is the invisible architecture of civilization, written not in laws or logic, but in the primal rhythms of the brain. Still, emotion is fragile, as all things in the storm are. Too much or too little, and balance collapses. Depression drains color from the world, making joy unreachable even when it stands close. Anxiety turns the sentinel amygdala into a tyrant, sounding alarms where no threat exists. Mania sets the storm ablaze, too bright, too fast, burning itself toward exhaustion. In each of these states, we see the delicate precision of the emotional landscape and how easily it can tilt into chaos. But fragility is not weakness, it is the price of depth. To feel deeply is to risk sorrow as much as joy. The same circuits that give us the rapture of music or the tenderness of love also leave us vulnerable to despair, to rage, to longing that never ends. The brain cannot give us one without the other. The storm is whole, and wholeness includes both light and shadow. This duality is what makes emotion so profoundly human. A machine may calculate faster, remember more perfectly, execute flawlessly, but it does not ache at beauty, does not weep at loss, does not tremble in awe of the stars. Emotion is the soul's proof of life, born not from some immaterial essence, but from sparks and currents woven through fragile flesh. That biology alone could create such depth is perhaps the greatest mystery of all. In the end, the landscape of emotion is not flat. It rises and falls like mountains and valleys, shifting as storms pass, as seasons change. Some days blaze with joy, others sink into shadow. But each variation shapes the terrain of identity, guiding us toward meaning. Without it, the self would be hollow, an architecture without color, a story without feeling. Emotions carve themselves into the body as much as the mind. In fear surges, the heart races, the breath quickens, muscles tense as though bracing for impact. When grief takes hold, the body bends beneath its weight, shoulders heavy, chest tight, as though carrying sorrow made physical. Joy, too, finds its place in the body, a widening of eyes, a loosening of muscles, a sudden lightness that feels almost like flight. The storm of emotion does not confine itself to neurons. It ripples outward, binding thought to flesh, mind to matter. This binding is why emotions are remembered more vividly than facts. A number can be forgotten, a date misplaced, a name lost in silence, but the feeling attached to them lingers. The brain does not store memories in sterile isolation. It engraves them with the colors of emotion, so that a childhood home is remembered not only in walls and windows, but in warmth, in comfort, in the sense of belonging it held. Emotion transforms recollection into experience, ensuring that the most important moments live on, not in detail, but in resonance. But emotion does more than preserve the past. It projects the future. Anticipation is itself the motion, a mirror of possibility painted across the present. The rush of excitement before a long-awaited reunion, the dread before an approaching loss, these are not events themselves, but feelings of events not yet lived. The brain rehearses, imagining, preparing, shaping action before the moment arrives. In this way, motion becomes both memory and prophecy, tying yesterday to tomorrow in the spark of the present. Yet the landscape is not uniform across all who walk it. For some, the valleys of despair are deeper, the peaks of joy more fleeting. Genetic inheritance plays its part, laying down the foundations of emotional rhythm. Experience shapes it further, childhood nurturing or neglect, trauma or love, scarcity or abundance. Each brain carries within it not only the universal machinery of emotion, but also the singular imprint of a life lived. No two landscapes are identical, and in this diversity lies both beauty and burden. Still, across all variations, one truth persists: emotion connects us. It is the language that requires no translation. Fears are understood across every culture, every continent. Laughter bridges gaps of tongue and nation. Even silence, when shaped by grief or love, communicates what words cannot. Our survival as a species has always depended on this shared emotional vocabulary, allowing us to bond, to trust, to create families and communities that endure beyond the individual. Without it, we would be solitary storms, lightning lost in isolation. And yet, even this shared language is not free from distortion. Emotions can deceive, pulling us toward what harms, pushing us from what heals. A false alarm in the amygdala can chain a person in fear. A flood of desire can blind reason, leading to choices we later regret. Evolution designed emotion for survival, but in a world no longer ruled by predators and famine, these ancient circuits sometimes misfire. The sentinel sees threats where there are none. The compass points toward shadows mistaken for light. Still, to imagine life without emotion is to imagine existence emptied of meaning. A perfectly logical being, untouched by joy or sorrow, would navigate the world like a machine through sterile corridors, efficient but unfulfilled. It is emotion that infuses life with depth, making triumph sweet, loss profound, love enduring, The storm of emotion may sometimes mislead, but it is also what makes the journey worth taking. In this paradox lies the essence of the human experience. The same currents that shake us with fear also uplift us with awe. The same circuitry that burns with anger also ignites with love. Emotion is not a flaw in the brain's design. It is its masterpiece. A fragile, volatile masterpiece, forever vulnerable to imbalance, yet capable of painting the canvas of life in colors no logic could ever create. And so the storm continues, each pulse of feeling a reminder that we are not simply thinkers, but feelers, not merely observers of existence, but participants immersed in its tides. The landscape of emotion is vast, treacherous, luminous, and in walking it, we discover not only the truth of the brain, but the truth of what it means to be human. There is a question that lingers like an echo across centuries, whispered by philosophers, poets, and scientists alike. What is the self? Behind the storm of neurons, rhythms of memory, and the tides of emotion lies something even more elusive, the quiet awareness that watches it all. Consciousness, the voice within the storm, the mirror that reflects itself. It is the strangest of paradoxes. The brain is matter, cells, chemicals, sparks of electricity, and yet from matter arises experience, the redness of a sunset, the sweetness of a melody, the ache of longing, the whisper of thought that says, "All I am." How does fire within neurons become the fire of awareness? How does a network of cells give rise to a self that feels alive within it? Science has mapped regions tied to consciousness: the thalamus, relaying signals like a gatekeeper; the cerebral cortex, weaving sensation into meaning; the brainstem, anchoring wakefulness. But mapping is not explanation. We know the parts that play their roles, but not the full orchestration. The hard problem of consciousness, as philosophers call it, remains unsolved. Why should a physical system produce subjective experience at all? Why should there be something it feels like to be human, rather than only the silent processing of information? Consciousness is more than perception. It is the awareness of perception. It is not just seeing the sunset, but knowing that you see it. It is not just thinking a thought, but hearing it echo inside yourself. It is the double mirror, one reflection gazing upon another, stretching into infinity. This strange recursion, the mind observing the mind, is at the heart of selfhood. Without it, we would be creatures of instinct, reacting to the world without ever knowing we had reacted. With it, we are beings who pause, reflect, and wonder. The self that arises from consciousness is both enduring and fragile. It feels continuous. The same I that looked out through a child's eyes now looks out through adult ones. Yet science shows us that this continuity is illusion. Neurons die and are replaced. Memories shift. Emotions reshape. Experiences rewrite identity. The I is not fixed, but a story told moment by moment, stitched together by the brain into the appearance of unity. The self is less a solid structure than a river, always flowing, never the same, yet always recognized as one. This river can split in rare neurological conditions. Consciousness itself fractures. Patients with split brain syndrome, their hemispheres divided by surgery, reveal two streams of awareness coexisting in the same skull, one hand buttoning a shirt, while the other unbuttons it, one hemisphere answering a question the other cannot hear. Here, the illusion of unity crumbles, exposing consciousness' fragile weaving of multiple voices. The self we take for granted as singular may, in truth, be a chorus carefully stitched into harmony. And yet, the mystery deepens. If consciousness is fragile, if the self is a construction, why does it feel so real? Why does the I persist, even when memory falters, when emotion shifts, when thought dissolves into silence? Perhaps because the storm within the brain cannot help but narrate. It weaves patterns from chaos, stories from fragments, meaning from sparks. In every rhythm it whispers, "This is me." Philosophers have long wrestled with whether the self is an illusion. Perhaps it is, but if so, it is an illusion of profound importance. To believe in the self is to create continuity, to anchor identity across the shifting landscapes of time. It is the scaffolding upon which we build relationships, responsibility, love, and hope. Whether real or constructed, the self shapes the way we move through the world. And still, the great question remains, is consciousness unique to the human brain? Or is it a universal phenomenon, waiting to be found wherever complexity arises? Some argue it may flicker, even in simpler creatures, in birds, in mammals, in octopuses that solve puzzles with uncanny intelligence. Others imagine consciousness not as a product, but as a fundamental property of the universe, like gravity or light, woven into the fabric of existence, waiting for matter to awaken it. If true, then the storm within our skulls is not the source of consciousness, but its vessel. Whatever its origin, consciousness is what makes life more than survival. It gives us the power to imagine, to create, to reflect. It gives us the haunting awareness of mortality, the ability to gaze at the stars and wonder not only what they are, but what we are. It is the voice that turns the storm into meaning, the fire that transforms matter into self. Consciousness is both the most intimate and the most mysterious of experiences. It is the one thing we cannot doubt, for even to doubt it is to be aware. And yet it is the one thing we cannot fully explain. Science can trace neural pathways, detect the rhythms of brainwaves, measure the flow of blood through regions of thought. But what these measurements reveal is only the shadow of consciousness, not its essence. To watch neurons fire is not to witness awareness, it is to see its echo, not the flame itself. And so we return to the question, what is the self? Perhaps it is best understood not as an object, but as a process, a continuous act of becoming. Just as a flame is not a thing but the pattern of burning, the self is not a fixed entity, but the pattern of thought, memory, and feeling woven together in time. The storm within does not create a permanent I, but a dance of awareness that renews itself in every moment. This perspective brings both comfort and unease. Comfort, because it suggests the self is adaptable, capable of change, never locked into the wounds of the past. Unease, because it challenges the illusion of permanence, the belief that the one who began this life is the same as the one who will leave it. If the self is a story, who is the author? If identity is a river, what remains when the water flows away? The edges of consciousness test these questions most acutely. In deep sleep, awareness vanishes, only to return with the dawn. In anesthesia, the self is dissolved, hours lost to oblivion, then restored as if nothing had passed. In coma, consciousness lies dormant, its presence uncertain, flickering at the threshold of silence. And in near-death experiences, people report visions, light, a sense of leaving the body, moments where the storm falters, yet awareness seems to persist. Are these echoes of the brain, or glimpses of something beyond? Science cannot say. What it can say is this: consciousness is fragile. It can be fractured by injury, dulled by drugs, unmade by disease. The self that feels so solid can vanish with a single blow to the head, a single alteration of chemistry. This fragility reveals the terrifying truth. Our identity is bound to the storm within, and when the storm ends, the self may vanish with it. And yet there is resilience. The brain does not surrender easily. In moments of trauma, other regions can awaken, compensating for damage. A person who loses language in one hemisphere may slowly reclaim it in the other. A mind fractured by injury may stitch itself back together, weaving a new sense of self from the remnants of the old. Consciousness, though fragile, is also stubborn. It fights to persist, to narrate, to endure. Still, perhaps the greatest power of consciousness is its ability to transcend itself. Unlike instinct, it can imagine possibilities that do not yet exist. It can dream futures, invent worlds, create art and music that have no place in survival, but every place in meaning. It can reflect on itself, wonder at its own existence, gaze into the storm within, and ask, "Who am I?" This recursive wonder may be its defining feature, the ability not only to exist, but to know that it exists. In the quiet moments, when thought slows and awareness lingers, consciousness feels less like an explanation and more like a mystery. A flicker in darkness, a flame that illuminates without revealing its source. We may never fully answer the question of the self, but perhaps the value of consciousness is not in solving it, but in living it, in feeling joy, in bearing grief, in loving and losing, and loving still. The self is not a puzzle to be completed, but a story to be lived. And so the storm continues, weaving sparks into awareness, awareness into identity, identity into the fragile illusion of self. Whether illusion or reality, it is enough. Enough to love, enough to wonder, enough to leave traces of meaning in the universe vast and silent. The self may be fleeting, but in its fleetingness lies its beauty, a flame that burns briefly, yet lights the darkness while it lasts. The brain has always been a frontier, but never has its horizon stretched so far as it does now. For centuries, we sought only to understand its mysteries, to map its folds, to decipher its rhythms, to listen for meaning in the storm. Now, for the first time in history, we do not stand only as observers, we stand as architects. The question before us is no longer simply, what is the brain, but what might it become? In research labs and hospitals, the future is quietly taking shape. Electrodes, thinner than a strand of hair, are placed deep within the brain to silence tremors, restore movement, ease the grip of disease. Brain-computer interfaces, once the realm of science fiction, allow paralyzed patients to move robotic limbs by thought alone. The storm of neurons translated into action outside the body. Artificial intelligence listens to the electrical symphony, learning to decode words before they are spoken, thoughts before they reach the lips. Step by step, the boundaries of the mind are being redrawn. This future carries both promise and peril. Imagine a world where memory can be preserved, where diseases like Alzheimer's no longer steal the self. Imagine the power to restore sight, hearing, even lost movement, to give back not only life, but the experience of living. For millions, this is not a dream, but a necessity. The merging of brain and machine may heal what once seemed beyond repair. Yet alongside hope comes unease. If we can shape memory, can we erase it? If we can read thought, can we control it? The storm that makes us human could be manipulated, rewritten, repurposed for aims beyond the self. The future of the brain is not only a story of progress, but of power, and power always brings questions. Who will control it? Who will have access? who will be left behind? Already, companies pursue visions of direct neural connection, uploading the mind into digital systems, extending thought beyond the boundaries of flesh. To some, this is immortality, the chance to outlive the body, to exist as information in the endless circuits of machines. To others, it is a hollow echo, the shadow of consciousness without its flame. Could a digital copy of the self ever be you? Or would it be nothing more than a reflection, a mask without a face behind it? Still, the momentum is undeniable. Artificial intelligence grows daily in its ability to learn, to mimic, to create. As we draw closer to linking human brains with these vast systems, a profound possibility emerges. The storm within, merged with the storm without, thought entwined with computation, identity expanded into networks far beyond individual skulls. We may, in time, become more than human, or something unrecognizable as human at all. And yet, as history has shown, every leap forward reshapes not only our tools, but ourselves. Fire gave us warmth, but also weapons. Machines gave us power, but also dependence. The technologies now rising will do the same with our minds. They will not only expand what we can do, but redefine what we are. The self, once bound to flesh and bone, may soon be written in code, extended into circuits, multiplied into copies. The question is not only whether we can, but whether we should. The storm within has always been our greatest mystery. Soon, it may also be our greatest creation. And in that creation lies both the possibility of salvation and the risk of losing what makes us human. The future of the human mind is not just written in laboratories and wires. It is written in choices. Every discovery carves a path forward, but also closes another behind. As we stand at this threshold, we must ask not only what is possible, but what is wise. For the storm within is not a machine to be tinkered with carelessly. It is the essence of who we are. One vision imagines the liberation of the mind from the body, consciousness uploaded, preserved forever in digital form, a kind of immortality, free from decay. But even mortality carries shadows. If you could live forever, would meaning fade? Does the beauty of life not arise, at least in part, from its brevity? The fleeting flame that burns brighter because it knows it must one day go out? To extend the self beyond death may grant continuity, but perhaps at the cost of humanity itself. Another vision imagines augmentation, not leaving the body but enhancing it. A brain more focused, more creative, more capable of holding memory, emotions tuned like instruments, intelligence amplified beyond natural limits. Such a world promises brilliance, but also division. If only some can afford to expand their minds, what becomes of the rest? Will humanity split into two species, those bound to the natural storm, and those whose minds ride lightning amplified by machines? And yet, perhaps the future is not in leaving behind what makes us human, but in deepening it, in using knowledge of the brain, not to erase its frailty, but to honor it, healing disease, restoring dignity, expanding empathy. For within the storm there is not only electricity, but tenderness. To understand the brain is not only to wield power, but to see with clearer eyes the fragility that binds us all. Even now, the storm inspires awe. The human brain, small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, can imagine galaxies, write symphonies, dream of eternity. No machine has matched the poetry of its sparks, no algorithm the depth of its emotion. Perhaps what lies ahead is not the replacement of the brain, but the recognition of its miracle and the responsibility to protect it. The final horizon is not only scientific, but philosophical. If we merge with machines, if we upload our minds, if we stretch consciousness beyond flesh, what will remain of the self? Will the flame still flicker, or will it be replaced by something altogether new? Will the storm within survive, or will it be absorbed into a storm without, vast but impersonal? These are not questions that science alone can answer. They are questions of meaning, of value, of what it means to be alive. And so we return to the beginning, the brain, a cathedral of lightning. It has carried us from the first flicker of thought to the threshold of a future where thought itself may be remade. It is both map and mystery, storm and silence, matter and miracle. As we look to the horizon, we must remember, the brain is not only the source of what we know, it is the source of who we are. To change it is to change ourselves. To lose it is to lose the very fire that makes us human. The storm continues, weaving sparks into meaning. Whether tomorrow brings healing, transcendence, or transformation, the truth remains. Inside the brain lies the greatest story ever told. The story of thought, of memory, of love, of self. A story still unfinished, still unfolding, written in lightning across the darkness of the mind.